Hey guys, this is OMG Gladle for Deuces Cracked, and this is the top 0.56%. Today we're going to be doing episode 4. So, the hand history we're going to go over today is actually a $3.19 rebuy, and the first hand history we did was a 35, so I feel that it might be a good idea to just do some different stakes for this hand history. Now, I did explain that in general the level of play is mostly quite similar at every buy-in level, but at the same time I'd still think it's maybe a good idea to do, like I said, a different stake. And also, this is a rebuy, so we can talk about the differences again, even though I did kind of mention it in my prelude. So the first thing is, before the first hand, we should always rebuy for the maximum. In other words, instead of 1500 chips, we should start with 3000. Now, because I was playing, I think, 30 tables, even though I normally do rebuy, I think I must have missed this one because apparently I had 1500 for the first few hands. So I'm just going to get straight into it once again. Now, every time it's a pretty standard fold. Once again, I'll just click next hand. As you can see, 6 for offsuit. No matter what happens, I'm pretty happily folding this pretty fast. Now, once again, if you guys disagree with any of these plays that I consider standard, feel free to post it in the forum and I'll reply. So fold, 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 fold. Now here we can maybe call them in raise, but as played, it's obviously a quick fold. For what it's worth, I probably get in like jacks and ace king here as a default. Now, because it's a rebuy and his stack is kind of short, which suggests that he might, and also the fact that he didn't rebuy suggests that he might be on the I don't know, fishier side in general. So that does mean that he sometimes will very often just sort of gamble shove very very wide here, especially because it's a rebuy. So if this were like say a 15 or an 8, I would say jacks and ace king would probably be my exact range here. Now, it's not just the fact that he shoved, but also there is like someone who min raised in the middle position first and a caller already, so that's why if I were closing the action and for example it had just folded blind versus blind and then he shoved, I'd probably call a bit wider, but not that much, maybe like tens and maybe ace queen suited or something. Now, one of the things that I can recommend you guys to do is when you see a guy with a stack like this, especially in a non-rebuy, but also in a rebuy of course, just like go and see what kind of hands, like if you have the time obviously, quickly go and click the replay button and see what hand he played to get that stack. So we can see here that he lost most of his chips here. Now we can see that from the action he called down with like a6, so we can kind of get an idea he's kind of like a calling station. He called down 3 streets on this board. So yeah, I mean, when you do look at the replay button, like I'm just saying, if there is a decision you're making and you see a guy with a stack like this, like it's not a full stack, he's obviously lost some chips. Quickly check like how he's lost them, as well as looking at his status, his HUD stats, and maybe even looking him up or looking at some previous notes you've got on him. You can also do that. It'll give you quite a lot of information sometimes. Like here, you can kind of just assume that he's probably on the fishier side. No offense if you're watching, but yeah. So. Yeah, some people like to limp here. I generally don't. I just think that these weak offsuit weak offsuit ace hands kind of give you like I don't know, bad reverse implied odds, and I don't know, they just play pretty trashy. Like you're putting in 10 chips and you're obviously getting good pot odds and blah blah blah. But I personally prefer to fold, especially since I'm mass tabling. Once again, I don't mind if you complete here, but I'd much rather have something that can, I guess, make a straight like queen 10 or like, yeah, I don't know, some pseudo connectors and obviously pocket pairs and stuff, but I much prefer to fold here personally. But yeah, it doesn't really matter so much if you do decide to play it. Here, yeah, I always fold here as a default. Versus a weaker player, it's okay to flat, especially if you're not playing many tables. But at the same time, like versus a regular, I would fold here every time. His isolating range might not be that tight, but at the same time, Ace Jack doesn't do too well against the even in position. Once again, this is a rebuy, and I should have topped up by now, but I still haven't. But yeah, I fold here pretty quickly. I'll defend Ace Queen and maybe Ace Jack suited, I guess, and like probably any pocket pair is fine as well. But yeah, I'm folding this pretty happily. Once again, pretty standard folds. Just mind you, we've moved position as we sometimes will. Here again, pretty easy fold. Once there's like this much dead money, there's also quite a lot of people who can call, and these these two things kind of balance out. On one hand, there's a lot of dead money that we can look to steal. On the other hand, there's also three players who are, who can all possibly potentially call our shove. So with the stack size, just to give you guys an idea, my range here would probably be something like 8s plus and maybe ace jack, I guess. Yeah, like if you change this range a little bit, it's definitely not so bad. But once again, with so much dead money, it can't be too bad here. And honestly, at the $3 rebuys especially, um, you will get called by worse as well sometimes, so that kind of balances out too. Like maybe your fold equity is a bit less because of that, obviously, but at the same time, lower pocket pairs will randomly call to gamble. And also because they're getting pot odds. Like for instance, if these two guys fold, and it gets back to this guy, it's probably not even like a big mistake or whatever to call sixes or whatever, just because he's getting so much pot odds. Like he has to put in like 1k more to win 3k or something, so he needs 33% and stuff. So yeah, I'm just saying, yeah, when you do shove with that range, you can get called by worse. And of course, like these random guys will call with ace 10 and I don't know, even worse hands than that, just because either they're bad or they want to gamble and they know they can rebuy and so on. Obviously, jack 3 suited is a fold, but once again, I think it's important to talk about what kind of range we would continue with. Here, pretty easy fold. Yeah, it would depend on the reads of this guy, but again, to give you an idea, I'm guessing maybe like 7s plus. Like we are a little bit on the deeper side slightly, but it's still a rebuy, and I think 7s or 6s plus are both fine, and like probably ace 9 suited, ace jack off, or ace 10 off even. Of course it seems kind of tight, but this guy is most likely a random, and their ranges usually aren't that wide, and pre-ante it's not really a great idea to get it in too wide. Once again, my range is possibly a little bit on the tighter side, but you can definitely can't go too wrong there. Here, once again, pretty easy fold, and I still haven't rebought, unfortunately. Here, I think I just folded looking at the bottom here, but it wouldn't be too bad to shove here, especially if the initial racer is a random. Because that'll mean we have more fold equity. If it's a reg, he should never really be folding once I jam here for the stack size if he's opening 3x in that position. But if it's a random, it can't be too bad. But ace queen I definitely jam here. And once again, maybe like 8s or 7s plus is definitely fine. I did fold my actual hand though. So yeah, I don't know, you can kind of just get an idea of like what these guys are doing. It's maybe not so bad for stack size actually, but yeah. Again, pretty standard here. With the stack size, pre-ante, it's a pretty standard fold with the stack size. It's something that I think maybe a few of my students have been unsure about, these kind of hands, like ace 10 as well, even ace jack here. It's with the stack size, just open raising is pretty bad in general. And yeah, open shoving is not profitable, so therefore we should just fold. To get a good idea about these ranges, there's not really much I can really say other than maybe check out Sit and Go Wizard. But yeah, again, this is a pretty standard fold. I think I would say like ace queen plus is definitely a jam. Ace jack suited plus is fine as well. And probably like 6. I would probably say even like 7s plus, maybe even 8s because of how early we are. If we had like 10 big blinds, it can be a little bit wider, but with the stack size pre-ante, it's pretty tight. Just to give you guys an idea. And once again, just remember, before the antes, the ranges are much tighter. With the same amount of big blinds. So here, like the blinds have gone up, and we can definitely shove this. I wouldn't shove much wider though. It's pretty similar to the last hand, except we're a little bit shorter now, obviously. But we've also moved one position backwards too, so it kind of balances out once again. But yeah, 8s is definitely for sure a shove, and I don't really know if anyone called. Okay, so pretty terrible call, obviously. Yeah, not much else to say. Just to give you an idea, like of how bad some people are, I guess. So yep, yeah, yeah. With the stack size, I wouldn't do anything other than just shove. Even though it's unbalanced, like I said earlier, I think in one of the earlier episodes, you can actually, even with a stack size like this, especially versus someone who isn't a regular, just make a min raise or a very small raise with like aces, kings, queens, to, I don't know, induce or get extra value, because if you shove, they fold so often. Whereas like hands like jacks and ace king, I generally just shove because they're not really as good to induce. The equity isn't as good the equity isn't as good, and they see a bad flop more often, in the sense that, like for instance, if he just flats with queens and especially kings plus, there's not many bad flops. Whereas with ace king, like often I can just miss. It's not such a problem with the stack size, but in other situations, there are better examples of spots where jacks and like ace king aren't really good to raise to induce, just because if the blinds or even anyone behind is kind of fishy, often you'll miss the flop and it can be quite hard to play. Again, here it's not such a big issue because if I raise to, say, for instance, 375 and he calls, I can kind of probably shove most flops if I mess with ace king, but at the same time I would rather just jam. And once again, I would usually just jam everything that I'm jamming here, and versus a random, like I said earlier, it's probably any two cards, maybe a little bit tighter because it's a rebuy, but it's still pretty close to any two cards versus a random. And yeah, just saying that you can, take the option of raising, like, say, queens plus or something to induce or get him to flat with worse hands and hopefully flop a bad pair and stack off. But yeah, jacks, I mean, I'm pretty sure I just jammed, yeah, and it's obviously pretty standard. Yeah, pretty easy fold, not much else to say. To give you an idea, readless, here I would probably go with, like, I think tens plus and yeah, ace king, basically exactly that. Not much else to say. I think like tens may seem a little bit loose, but I think it's fine in a rebuy. And let's just see if okay. I mean, doesn't really say much. They both got it in with the nuts, but you do see like worse hands get in there sometimes. I think, and like I said, I think tens ace king is fine. So here, not much else to say. It's pretty standard to fold here, just because, and this is something that I'm not actually sure if I've mentioned yet, but basically when you are looking at a hand in a particular position, it may be a pretty good hand that you can open pretty standard, but as a standard, sorry, but when the stacks behind are pretty standard reshoving stack sizes, then that can often make you lean towards a fold with a hand that you can't profitably jam yourself, and you can't call a jam with either. So for instance, even if I had like queen jack suited here, I would probably just fold, simply because if I raise, I can't really call a shove from the small blind or the big blind, and I mean the small blind, I'm sorry, the button I obviously would call, but yeah, I mean, having said that, obviously, if they're rigs, they're more likely to shove, so that's more of a problem if they are rigs. Whereas, for instance, in this exact spot, if the small blind and the big blind were both like, fish who are unlikely to reshove, it can be better to open like this hand or queen jack suited type hands because obviously they call, and obviously you can get a pretty good idea about what kind of flops to c-bet as well. So, yep. And and subsequently, obviously c-bet when they check on the right kind of flops, and they'll check fold quite often, and you can win some pots and stuff. And basically, you aren't forced to fold pre-flop often. Here, once again, a pretty standard fold. Generally, I don't really think I flat too much here with anything, and I would probably rejam like ace queen plus and like nines plus. I think something like that. Of course, you can sometimes flat, I don't know, for like balance or whatever if you really want to, but yeah, generally, again, it's not really balanced, but sometimes I might flat here with like aces or kings or whatever, just because with the stack to pot ratio, it's not really a big issue to, to give him give him a free flop, and yeah, you can often make more this way, and also sometimes occasionally someone behind will shove, and you can again, win more this way. With king queen, it's a pretty easy fold. Here, I guess it's not that close. I think it's a somewhat standardish jam. The only concern is with our stack size, 14 BBs, it's a little bit on the deeper side pre-ante, but at the same time, quite a few people don't have effective stacks of that much. So for instance, the guy next to us has like 8, and this guy has 10, and the big blind has like 4, so I think it's fine. And well, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's fine actually, so yeah, I mean, I would jam this. Like, I'd say 7s plus and maybe 6s is kind of close, but I think 7s plus is better. And like, yeah, probably ace 10 suited ace jack, or maybe even just ace jack suited ace queen, but either way it's not too bad. And if the blind's about to go up, and if I haven't already mentioned this, or if I have, I'll mention it again. If blind's about to go up, or you're under the gun or nearly under the gun, in other words, you're about to lose fold equity in the next few hands, your range should be wider than it normally would be. So for instance here, if I go to the info tab and I see that the blinds are going to go up in the next hand or within a minute or something, I would shove here wider than I normally would because I'm about to lose fold equity, because once I get hit by the blinds, then I'm gonna have a smaller stack, and also because I'm nearly under the gun as well, I'm gonna be hit by the blinds pretty soon as well. So that is again another influence in my decision. Yeah. So I mean, I'd still jam this for sure. But for instance, if I did know that the blinds were going up in the next minute or so, then I would also maybe, for instance, definitely jam 6s. Whereas now at the moment 6s is kind of close. as an example once again. With his stack size, like I don't blame him for calling, so whatever. I'd probably still fold in this spot, but it doesn't really matter, and we lose. And I still didn't rebuy, I think, so maybe I just completely missed the point of this being a rebuy tournament. But whatever. Yeah, blind versus blind. I think it's a pretty standard call versus basically everyone. Once again, if it's not regular, I'd call somewhat tightish here, but I guess I'd still call like fives or so plus. Um, I would probably still call any suited ace, and like ace 7-ish off plus, and maybe king 10 suited, king jack off or something like that. Once again, in game maybe it's not exactly that, maybe I call a little bit different, but I definitely try to look for anything that hints that he's on the looser or tighter side and adjust my range accordingly. So for instance, his HUD stats or how many tables he's playing and stuff. But yeah, otherwise it's somewhat. I think my range given is okay as a default. So we bust, and finally we get a message that asks us if we want to rebuy. So I did. Here, obviously easy fold, but again, to give you an idea, I'd probably say like, I guess tens plus and like ace king, maybe ace queen suited, I guess, but probably ace king. The first guy I would imagine to be pretty wide. He's almost definitely not a regular because he just, yeah, because of his stack size, I guess, and also pretty much just that actually. Sorry, I was going to say because you jam, but obviously with these stack sizes it's pretty standard to jam, but I would say it's most likely not a regular. The second guy, not much to say. Like, of course if it's a regular, my range would be a little bit tighter, although I think tens ace king is maybe still okay. Maybe it'd become jacks ace king if I knew he's a regular, but otherwise I think it's fine. And just to give you an idea, what do they turn up with? Okay, so you can see like ace 9 gets it in anyway, so yeah, I mean, I pretty happy, yeah, tens plus ace queen is fine. Here, obviously fold. So now we have antes, we jam wider than normal. So here, normally once there are antes, we don't very often fold pocket pairs because they're really good to jam. But in this exact spot, we're quite deep with a lot of people, and it's a hand that flops pretty poorly, so it's not really one that we want to open. With the stack size, generally we should probably not really be shoving anything, so we should kind of be raising our entire range or folding. And once again, like low pocket pairs and even medium pocket pairs, especially like, you know, sevens, sixes, eights kind of hands, don't really flop very well. So I would, and we can't really call rejams with them. I mean, eights is kind of is a bit closer, I guess, and even sevens is maybe a little bit closer, but probably still, I would say like eights plus I'd raise here, but sevens and under I'd probably just dump. Once again, like we can't really call a shove usually unless it's from like a short stack like Jesse James 99 over there. And yeah, if we do get flattered, which we often will versus these weaker players, these hands don't flop well, so we'd much rather have a hand like, for instance, King Queen or even King Jack suited or something. Generally, I would probably not personally open King Queen, although it's definitely fine to. So yeah, to give you an idea, I guess I open probably like here, Ace Jack off and ace 10 suited plus, and maybe in game it's even tighter, and sometimes as tight as like ace jack suited, ace queen off, but and yeah, probably pocket eights plus also, and obviously whether we call a rejam or not depends on which hand we have, and obviously the opponents and any reads we have, but twos I fold really happily here every time. So yeah, not much to say. Obviously not with our particular hand, but it's a spot, sorry, where we can either stop and go or rejam. Often in this exact spot, I think with the stack size, rejamming is usually better because when he makes it 3x here, it's almost always not a regular, so it's a weaker player. And versus weaker players here, even though we shouldn't really, just because it's kind of bad for him to raise fold this size or whatever, we definitely do have fold equity, so yeah, but this hand obviously doesn't cut it. Pretty easy fold for obvious reasons. When he jams this much, if it's a random, I would be quite tight here because he's jamming quite a lot. Even if it's a regular, like his range for jamming here should be somewhat on the tighter side. But let's say it's a random and I have no reads, I would probably go with like eights plus and ace jack suited, ace queen at the widest, probably maybe even like ace queen and like nines plus or something. yeah, like I said, when he jams this much, it's probably like a tight-ish range, although generally you can kind of exclude the top of his range because he'll usually raise those rather than shove them. So for instance, he probably almost never has aces and kings here and queens even. Sometimes jacks and ace king will do this just because they're scared to see a flop, especially from weaker players, but obviously fold. Here, pretty standard jam if it folds around. Here it's somewhat close-ish. If it's a regular, I definitely rejam here. If it's not, then I might just dump it just because we're kind of early-ish. At the same time, the big blind and the guy next to us both are short-ish, and it kind of balances out. I would say like versus a random, nines is is a hand you have to get in here. Eights is close-ish, and I think sevens is probably a fold. I got it in though, so either I didn't think enough, or maybe it was a rig, but I can't remember for sure. Okay, king 2. I was just thinking if I guess it could be an. I think it's pretty borderline, even if it's a rig. Like, as in, I'm just thinking about his shove. I'm pretty sure it's kind of bad unless the blinds are going up very soon. Yeah, I wouldn't jam king 2 suited there. I don't think. Maybe if I were a bit shorter, but yeah, I was just thinking if it's a regular, whether his shove is good or not. But I don't think it is. Here it's yeah, I guess it's not that close. It's probably nearly the bottom of my range, but I think it's okay to rejam here. And once again, probably ace queen, ace jack suited. Eights plus or maybe nines is okay. I get nines plus is okay too. So I think I jammed, yeah, and I get called by king queen again. Pretty awful read list for him. Like, I don't think it's a regular because I don't think a regular will like raise call king queen there. But yeah, and yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, I don't know. Once again, probably just a random who made a bad call, I think. Here, pretty easy fold. Jacks, generally we're never folding this no matter what, almost. Yeah, once again, like with these stack sizes, often I'll just jam. Even though the big blind is like, kind of deep with us, but at the same time, again, it's not really balanced, but I don't really care about balance versus randoms. There's no need to balance. They're not going to see us again. We don't need to, balance a range, like I said. So even versus a lot of the regulars, I don't even bother because most of them don't really adjust. And it's not necessarily because they're bad. Sometimes it's because they're weaker. But at the same time, also some of them are just playing so many tables. And people like even like me, I probably miss like over half of the stuff, like this. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with being unbalanced in the 180s in general. But yeah, here pretty fine to like min raise, and at the same time, I actually do min raise a lot of trash here too, because I can profitably min raise and call the small blinds shove and fold to the big blinds shove if he shoves. And this is a good example about bringing up a point that if I haven't talked about this already, it's definitely important that in many spots you can shove if it's profitable to do so, but often, depending on the stack size, it's actually definitely fine to like min raise and call a shove from a small stack or any of the small stacks behind and fold to a shove from a big stack. Now, obviously, this can be on the cutoff or even under the gun, but like at the same time on the button as well. Like in this particular situation, like let's say, especially if the big blind had like say 2k more or something, he's even deeper. Like if we have, say, for instance, king 10 or something, that's a really, really, really standard spot to like raise small, probably even min raise and then call the small blind shove and fold to the big blind if he does shove. Now, this just brings up another point that recently came up quite a few times in discussions I had with a few students of mine, and basically it was just in such spots I would recommend to min raise, because if the reason for min raising, like other than balance, which isn't really an important factor, is because you have to fold to a shove from the big blind and you can call the small blind shove. Now if you think about that, we should min raise rather than make it like 2.25 times, because simply when the big blind does shove and we have to fold, we lose 100 less or whatever. So if we made it 900 here and the big blind shoved, we fold and we lose 900. If we make it 800, it's not really going to change his range, and we lose 100 less. Now it's not a major point, but definitely do consider that if you haven't really done so already. Here, like, I mean, there's not really much to say. You can do whatever you want to. You can raise, you can flat. I usually almost always raise. The donk is so small, and we're definitely not folding. So yeah, okay, I just flatted, I guess. Now, once this turn comes, I think we can safely just call and let him bluff off the stack. Eight's not folding anyway, but yeah, like I don't know what I did in game, but as played, like I would probably raise the flop, but as played, I think calling the turn is probably best, because if he does like check the river, we can still shove for like basically around pot size, a little bit over, I guess. Oh no, sorry, under pot size, because once we call, the pot will be 5,300. and he's got 4800 behind. But yeah, once again, there's not really much value in raising in general, like as played. So I mean, I did, which is bad, and the size is obviously really bad. Like, it's either shove or or not raise. But yeah, like I said, I would flat the turn, because we basically don't really have anything to be worried about. So if he's bluffing, he can continue to bluff, and if he's not, then yeah, we can still get it in against like weaker full houses easily. Here, even though we're getting really really good pot odds, it's a pretty standard fold. Versus like regulars and stuff with these stack sizes, you can 3-bet bluff hands, especially hands that have like an ace or a king. In other words, a blocker, which means it's less likely for them to have premium hands such as ace king, aces, kings, and even hands that can continue. So like ace queen for instance will flat maybe. But yeah, I mean, I don't really 3-bet light as a bluff, like even in the later stages, in the 180s in general. But it's definitely something you can occasionally do, or it's just an option basically. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd be jamming anything here just because of how deep we are, obviously. So everything, it's either flat or 3-bet or fold. This hand, again, we're getting really good pot odds, but it just doesn't play well out of position, and I prefer to fold. Flatting can't be too bad, I guess, but I would advise you guys to just fold. Yeah, pretty standard isolate. I think I must have missed it in the game, but yeah, like there's so much dead money, and even though the big blind should be calling almost every time, um, it doesn't really matter because of our hand. But once again, if we do fold, we also kind of preserve our image a little bit, because if we do show up with this, even though it's standard, like the bad players or the weaker players won't really understand, and they'll see is us, shoving with this bad hand, and that will affect our fold equity later, maybe a little bit. So you can lean towards a fold, but I think it's a pretty standard isolate, and I would probably jam here. In game normally, so I made a mistake, I think. Here, really easy jam. It's roughly 10 big blinds, on the button, and there are antes, and the small blind is shorter, and our hand is much better than 3-2 offsuit, so pretty standard jam, like every time, unless the big blind is a regular, that's either a reg or just the random being bad. Sometimes, randoms happen to make good calls for the wrong reasons. Like if it's a reg, it's a pretty good call versus me. Or like, I mean, it's kind of the bottom of the range that they should be calling, but it's still, I guess, an okay call versus me. But I mean, if it's a random, it's a bad call, because I doubt they're calling for the right reasons. But whatever. So we run good. Next hand, here, really really standard jam. Definitely any pocket pair, any ace, any king, probably like most, if not every queen, and I don't know, like most suited connectors, like just basically very very wide. Any Broadway for sure. Like I don't expect too much fold equity from the big blind especially, but there's a lot of dead money, and with these hands we have good enough equity even if they call almost every time, and sometimes they will fold. Okay, and the big blind folds, expert play. So yep, next hand. Once again, I mean not once again, but this is a spot where it's a good example of where I can kind of like min raise or raise small, and then fold to a jam from the bigger stacks and call it off from the small blind, and probably call it off versus this, the button, just because of pot odds. I didn't min raise here because I think that in this spot, a little bit of a bigger raise will actually affect what kind of range the big blind calls with a little bit. Yeah, not much else to say, and I guess it also means that it's not really a good reason, but it means that I'm more committed to the button if he shoves. But so as played, I think I have to call, and I did. So I mean, if he's really tight, you can maybe even fold as played, but I don't really like raise folding for those kind of stack sizes, effective stack sizes. So yeah, yeah, pretty standard fold, I guess. Again, it's a pretty good spot where you would min raise many hands. Like probably, I probably wouldn't even shove anything here just because of how deep we are with some of the players. So, once again, with our weaker hands, for instance, like ace 9 here, you can definitely min raise or raise small and call the small stacks and fold to the bigger stacks. Ace 4 is just a fold though. Here, once again, we've moved, just so you guys know. Here's a fold. Ace 10, pretty standard jam, although we are a little bit on the deeper side of the big blind, and maybe even the button and the small blind, I guess. But I personally prefer to jam here every time. It's definitely profitable, and I don't really want to raise call and induce with such a hand, so I prefer to just jam myself every time. Once again, this is something that some regulars prefer to raise and reevaluate, and some people like me just prefer to jam. And once again, if you're playing many tables, it's easier to just jam, although especially versus really weak players who are really tight and passive and stuff, it might be better to just raise and reevaluate. Especially with those deeper stacks. Obviously, if we're shorter, like if we were like say 10 big blinds deep or something, or whatever, it says jam every time. But with this kind of stack, these kind of stack sizes, especially the big blind being like 22 big blinds deep or something, then it's definitely an option we can consider to just raise and reevaluate, because he won't really be rejamming light ever if he's a random, especially if he's got tighter stats. Here, I don't know if it's a reg or not, but I think that I would call this probably even versus most randoms. Like, we need 44% to call. Now, because of skill, maybe I'll make that like say 46% or something to tax, like I said, for skill. Having said that, King 8 has really good equity versus any two cards. It's got like say 60% or something, and obviously I realize he's not showing any two on average, but I'll just quickly show all, and then I'll do like a more reasonable range. And I mean, I can show you, so 56 I guess, but I can show you on Sit and Go Wizard as well. But basically, I think that we definitely need have the 46% or something that we need. Like, even if he's shoving like say I guess 50%, it's probably closer actually. Yeah, so even versus 50%, we have more than enough, so he can be shoving a bit more. And on average, I think 50% is pretty reasonable. And unless he's got like some sort of nitty stats, I think that this is probably a fine call versus like even versus most randoms. That being said, like if I had King 2, which instead only has like I think 51% or something equity versus any two cards, I'd be calling versus regulars, and but probably not randoms, because obviously the difference in equity is pretty significant. He's got Ace Queen, so I guess like it doesn't prove anything, but I still think it's fine to call here. Probably the bottom of my range versus most randoms though. And just for the record, I think I probably call like 2s plus any ace. Yeah, probably like King 8 or King 7 offsuit, and then King 5 suited or something like that. So yeah. Yeah, pretty standard fold. Like with the stack size, I think it's very often just the regular who's trying to get extra fold equity when he does that, like I kind of talked about earlier. I would probably go with like any pocket pair and any ace here, just because even if he's kind of got like a tighter range than I assume, then there's quite a lot of dead money, and the stack size is quite shallow, so I think it's probably fine to get in any ace here. If he's a random, then obviously it'll be a little bit tighter, but I think it's definitely fine to get in any pocket pair, any ace here, and probably like any Broadway or almost any Broadway. So yeah, this particular hand is a fold though. Here, pretty easy fold. I would probably get in like ace. I'm not exactly sure. Again, it depends completely on reads, but maybe like ace 9 or ace 10 suited, ace jack ish, ace jack off ish, and like 7s plus, I guess. Once again, completely dependent on reads. Pretty easy fold. Again, easy fold here. With these stack sizes, once again, it's a spot where I have to raise and call the short stacks and probably fold to the big stacks. Small blind is kind of close. I think I have to fold just because he's never rejamming light enough, although I do hate folding with these stack sizes. Okay, I did jam. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely I wouldn't say definitely, but I'm pretty sure it should still be profitable. Now, it's a spot where you can, like I mentioned earlier in the series, look at, like, say for instance, like the pushing charts, and then kind of average their stack sizes. So for instance, obviously we're really deep. Well, we're not really deep, but we're somewhat deep. And in terms of M, we have, let's say 3.6, like 10 M, whereas effectively we've only got, like, for instance, versus this guy like 2, versus this guy like I don't know 8 or something. And obviously the effective M is a bit different, but on average, like if we average the M, Queen Jack suited will definitely be in that shoving range, and probably even Jack 10 suited will be fine too. But yeah, once again, I think definitely it's better to raise here and reevaluate. Like I said, it's easier to do this if you're multi-tabling, so that's maybe one of the reasons. And also maybe I missed out the stack size. I mean, it's not actually that bad, just because the button is really the only one that we're kind of worried about. But even like the guy before him is a little bit deep-ish with us too, but with 15 BBs, with antis, it's definitely fine anyway. And even with these stack sizes, it's profitable to jam, but I think it's better to raise just because that way we lose much less when they do have a premium, and they shouldn't really be rejamming very light unless they're regulars. And here, once again, I did the same thing. It's a little bit worse than Queen Jack suit, obviously, but I think it should still be fine. And it's probably with these stack sizes, it would be the bottom of my range if I'm jamming exclusively. And with these stack sizes, I don't really like raising many hands. Just because they should rejam kind of often, and many hands don't really play too well with these kind of stack sizes. So for instance, like ace 7 offsuit or something like that, I would just dump probably. Although if Viota here was a little bit shorter, I would probably jam it. No, I mean I would jam it. Sorry, like if he had say 5k less or something. This hand I still decided to jam. Oh wow, lose. It's okay. Here fold. Not much to say. Queen 7 suited under the gun with these stack sizes is a fold. Here, even though like yeah, basically I'm just gonna say, with reads it can be an extremely easy jam. Without reads it's a very easy jam. So it's just, you know, it's still a very easy jam with this particular hand. And these stack sizes, I expect him to fold very often on average, even if he is a random. And I mean, yeah, there's just so much dead money. If he folds, we win like 5.35k immediately. That's half his stack. So like even if he folds 30% or something like that, like it should be it will be profitable, because, you know, yeah, there's so much dead money that even when he does call, we're gonna have enough equity for it to be break evenish versus his range. And when he folds, we just win it, you know, full stop. So yeah, I would probably jam any ace here with these stack sizes and antes, any pocket pair for sure, probably any Broadway, and like maybe like suited connectors like 8-9 suited plus or something like that, pretty damn wide, I guess. Yeah, once again, these things change with reads and also, you know, stack sizes and these things. But yeah, in that particular spot, pretty easy jam with the hands I said. Here, pretty standard isolate just because of the pot odds. If he were a little bit deeper, it wouldn't be as good, because obviously the pot odds wouldn't be as good when the big blind folds. But here, any pocket pair for sure. And I would say, yeah, probably any ace, because even a random with that stack size will be jamming like very wide. So he folds. Unfortunately, we get cooled. So it's okay. Here, easy fold. Ace queen, yeah, pretty easy isolate. I would say, like, depending on if it's a rig, then I'd be wider, but if it's a random, I guess like ace 10 suited, ace jack off, maybe a little bit wider actually, even versus a random. They sometimes jam like suited broadways and pocket pairs, so I guess maybe like, yeah, probably not much wider. Maybe like at widest ace 9 suited, ace 10 off, but probably more like ace 10 suited, ace jack off, and like 7s or 8s plus, I guess. So yeah, probably leaning towards 8s just because there's still 3 stacks behind us, but it's obviously like kind of close. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know if I don't know if at the time I had better reads or anything, but this, you know, I would lean towards saying it's somewhat of more of a rig play. Like, I mean, obviously this is a standard jam, but on average, randoms probably don't necessarily jam it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% sure, obviously, but I don't think randoms on average jam like this hand, just because even though there are antes, they don't really adjust, so that's why. But yeah, yeah, pretty standard jam. Once again, you can consider to raise and fold to the button if he shoves, just because in these games, you know, the weaker players are not going to be rejamming light often enough for it to be, you know, for them to be exploiting you or something like that. So it might be optimal. When I say optimal, I mean the best play to raise and call everyone except for the button. But you know, I prefer to shove personally, so I don't have to see a flop, and also because it's like, in other words, it's easier to multi-table as well. Here, it's kind of close. Like if it's a regular, I'll probably rejam this as the bottom of my range. Like if I'm on the button, it'll be wider because there's less people to act behind us. But versus a lot of regulars, I'll rejam here. Close to the bottom of my range. In game, I probably either like knew he wasn't a rig, or I wasn't sure enough, and like I wasn't sure enough he was to, you know, isolate here, so I folded. So yeah, pretty easy call. We need 31%. I'm calling probably close to any 2 cards, if not any 2 cards. Once again, if I have something that I feel has, like, you know, for instance 28%, which isn't quite enough to call, I'll probably just call, just so in the future any of these guys who sees me make a, you know, like, I mean, not like a light, well, I mean, like, for instance, if I have like say 2-3 off here and I call, then, you know, they will see that I can make light calls, and they'll be scared to jam into me in the future. So it's probably worth the, you know, -2% or whatever. So yeah, Yeah, pretty easy fold. To give you an idea, readless, I'd probably say like nines or tens plus and ace queen plus. I mean, ace queen is kind of close actually, because like if the button is a random, then his range will kind of be tight-ish. Well, probably even quite tight actually. So yeah, but I would probably still get in like nines or tens plus, and definitely ace queen. Probably ace queen too. Definitely ace king though, and definitely like say like yeah, tens I would definitely get in anyway. If they're both regs, for instance, then maybe I go as like down to like eights or so. Although their ranges actually might be even wider, but I guess to be safe, eights and like ace jack suited, ace queen off or something like that. But yeah, to give you an idea. Okay, so they both again, everyone's showing up with standard hands in the nuts. Here, once again, it does depend on reads, but with this stack size, I think six is fine to get in here. I think even a random should be shoving any pocket pair here, most of the time, and probably like some aces we dominate, like ace six, ace five, ace four, three two, especially suited. So okay, so once again, like the top of the range every time, but can't really say much. Here, pretty standard fold again. Here with these stack sizes, pretty yes standard jam, but once he jams first, because we have less equity of the dead money, then we do have to be a bit tight with our range. And as play, like, well, once he raises, I would probably say something like sevens or sixes plus, like probably king queen and like ace, maybe ace 8 off, ace 6 suited or something. Like he should be close to any two cards, although if he's a random I jam a little bit wider, sorry, tighter, just because he won't be any two cards. But if it's a rig, definitely what I said, and maybe even a little bit wider. But yeah, just to give you an idea. Yeah, pretty easy check. With this stack size, there's not much I jam here because we're quite deep, although there is so much dead money that we can even jam some like better aces and stuff here, but it's fine to just check here. On the flop, I don't know what I did. I think I maybe just check folded. Yeah, I mean if he bets small, I can maybe we can peel one street or something. But yeah, when they make such a big size, it's usually on average probably kind of strong, and yeah, it's definitely not worth getting involved once he overpots it. Here, pretty easy fold. Yeah, it's a pretty good example of where I think it's best to min raise here and fold to the small blind. Maybe I shoved in game, which probably wouldn't be terrible, but I think it's definitely better to min raise. Yeah, okay, I shoved in game. I guess I like to shove, so yeah, pretty standard shove. Not much to say. Even with the stack size, effective with the button, it's a pretty standard shove. So yep. Again, it's yeah, not much to say. It's a pretty standard shove. I get looked up by aces, and we run good, so it's okay. Again, standard shove. Like, if I had, say for instance, king 8 here, which I probably think is a close shove, I will fold now because I've, jammed the last four hands or something and turned up with jack 10, which is probably, in the eyes of these guys, like a really, really crazy hand to jam, so, yeah. But king 10 is still a clear jam, and like I said, king 8, which is normally the bottom of my range here, I would guess, would become a fold, but, if it's king 10, I still jam every time. Fold. Ace 5, yeah, should be pretty standard to jam here. Not much to say. Yeah, it's yeah, with these stack sizes, I mean, not much to say again. And like, if it's close to the bubble, which I'm not 100% sure if it was, then it's even easier to jam. Here, call any two cards every time. With these pot odds, like, not again, not much to say, but it's a standard, call any two cards, including 2-3 offsuit. Here, easy fold. Yeah, I would probably fold anyway just because my image is kind of bad at the moment, and the big blind is almost always committed. Like, if I didn't have a bad image, I would still jam here with 6-5 just to isolate the pot. Oh, actually, probably not actually, because we're kind of deep with the small blind. So if I had 10 big blinds, I would jam this even, like, obviously assuming this the guy next to us folded. I would jam this if we didn't have a bad image because there's so much dead money and we can kind of isolate for the pot odds. But with this stack size, with this hand, I would just fold either way. And yeah, okay, he calls. Sometimes they fold even with that stack size, you'd be surprised. Here, once again, not much to say. It's a pretty standard jam. Again, like, I guess you guys know now, I'm not gonna say much, I'm just gonna jam. He calls, good for him. show something for calling me. Yeah, like I said earlier in one of the episodes, when they limp blind versus blind, 10 big blinds and under, and sometimes even more, jam any two cards. Like for instance, let's say I say 10 big blinds is the deepest you can be before you should jam any two cards. Then if we become like 11 big blinds deep, once again, remember, if your hand becomes better than 3-2 offsuit, like it becomes say 6-5 offsuit, then you can still jam, because even though 3-2 offsuit might not be profitable for 11 big blinds, which I'm not saying it isn't, then 6-5 is like significantly better in equity enough to the point where it can become a jam, even if 3-2 is a fold. But I mean, this is definitely a jam. I'm just giving you like an example, and yeah, I mean, they usually almost always fold. Again, obviously if it's a regular or something, it's a little bit different, but if it's a random, I do it every time. Here, pretty standard jam. I mean, the big blind is a little bit on the deeper side, but with our particular hand, it's fine. And I would jam any pocket pair here as well. Not as much as, like, as in I wouldn't jam as wide as I normally would because of the stack size of the big blind, I guess, but, still pretty wide. I guess, like, decent broadways, any pocket pair, I guess, like, a little bit over half of the aces or something. And also calling here with some hands is probably okay as well, like the weaker broadways or whatever, just because we have such good pot odds. But yeah, I usually prefer to jam off fold, as you guys can see. But yeah, I think this is a pretty clear jam here. Again, it does depend on reads, but with these stack sizes, I think it's fine, although it's kind of close. Like if it's a regular, it's probably not that close, but if it's a random, it's kind of close because the small blind is quite deep with us. So given that if this is a random and the small blind is quite deep with us, I would probably go as like, I'd say 8s plus is a must go with, and 7s is kind of close. I think 6s is probably a fold if it's a random and the small blind is quite deep with us. So jacks again, I just get called over and over again. I'm gonna cry. So okay. Again, pretty standard jam. Like, you can raise if you want to, but I definitely prefer to jam every time because it's not really a hand you want to induce with, and it's profitable to jam with. So here, again, pretty easy fold. Here, if it's a reg, I isolate. If it's a random, it's kind of close, although with 4 big blinds, I think it's probably a jam even versus almost every random too. Pretty sure I did isolate here, and I think it's really standard. Like I said, even a random versus a random, it's isolate because they should be jamming like every Broadway, like unless they're the nettest of nets, with 4 big blinds with antes and any pocket pair and stuff. And we definitely have good, like we have not only good pot odds but good equity versus the range, I think. So yeah, as you can see, like Queen 10 pretty standard. Even if it's not a regular, I expect them to shove Queen 10 and like most Broadways. Here again, like it's kind of deep-ish with the button, but if you calculate the average M or whatever, like this is definitely fine to shove. It's close-ish to the bottom of my range, and I don't love shoving here just because he's kind of deep, but at the same time, I don't really want to raise call either, like to the blinds. I mean, with these stack sizes, it's probably fine to make it like, say, 13,500 or something, and call it off versus the blinds and fold to the button. But I think I just shoved in game. Okay, and they fold. Pretty easy fold. Here, easy fold. To give you an idea of what I call here, again, depends on if it's a random or regular. If it's a regular, I call like any ace, any pocket pair. Probably not most, but a lot of decent broadways and stuff. If it's a random, probably like maybe like 5s or 6s plus or something, and like any suited ace and maybe ace 6 off or something. Like it's not a big difference, but yeah, versus a random, it's a little bit tighter. But we're getting pretty good pot odds. We need like 37.7%, as you can see. To tax myself, maybe 39. Like the blinds are so big that I wouldn't apply the tax too much, but if you do want to tax it, like 38.5 or something. And yeah, even a random with 5 big blinds should be somewhat wide. And like I said, we're getting good enough pot odds so that we don't need to have that much equity anyway. Yeah, pretty easy fold. Okay. Yeah, pretty. Again, just because of the fact that I don't expect the small blind to like play back and jam light, then I think it's probably best to min raise here and call the big blind and fold if the small blind rejams. Although I often expect the small blind to just flat. But I decided to jam, and it's definitely like fine and unexploitable to jam there, but at the same time, it's probably better to raise. Here, same thing really. It's better to min raise and call the blinds, but fold to the small blind. But I play like a robot. Yeah, same thing really. Okay, so this is an example where I can do many things. I think jamming is actually jamming should be profitable actually. Although my image is kind of bad, but jamming no, jamming is fine. Although I think that it's definitely fine to limp in beating like most flops, if not any, and also of course to raise smallish, like 15,000 or something. This flop, I don't really. I think it's probably best to just check fold it. Yeah, and I mean, obviously this kind of gay when he bets the size, but I think it's still best to just fold. Like this is a flop that hits his flatting range pre-flop pretty wide, and there's not much to say. Like I would just not see bet this flop at all. Yeah, here it's it looks like I jammed, but it's probably better to fold here because we're deep with the small blind. Once again, the big blind I think will call almost every time, if not every time, but we still have good equity of the pot because of the dead money. But with the small blind being like kind of deepish, then I prefer to just fold. Okay, this is fine too, and I obviously just hope the small blind will fold. Okay, he raises, so and the big blind folds. Like I mean, he obviously thinks it's strong, raise, re-raise, but he doesn't realize he should be calling any two cards there. But yeah, I mean, um, as you can see, sometimes when these guys do wake up, they just do raise you, and I mean, I really, really, really doubt he's light here, especially since the big blind is basically committed. So yeah. Again, we moved, just we're here now. Okay, so here, pretty easy fold. Again, our range completely depends on if it's a rig or not, and also what kind of rig he is. But yeah, pretty easy fold once again. Fold, 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 fold. It's yeah, I folded here just because I'm kind of deep with the original limper and also one guy behind, and um yeah, it's otherwise I like if I was say like 330k shorter or something, I would jam, but with the stack size, I think I just fold in this position especially. Now I think yeah, this is the final table I think, so we can talk a little bit about ICM now because I think that's something that people have been interested in for a while and have asked quite a bit about. Now there's quite a lot of explanation to ICM, and I don't really want to go into too deep of a detail, but and I think I have actually mentioned some of this already, but basically in the 180s. uh, the ICM that you need to know about is basically, simply put, not all chips in play. Sorry, all the chips in play aren't equal to all of the prize pool. Now, if you think about that, it implicates a few things. Now, in a typical cash game, obviously, if you gain $1, $1 of like a $1 chip, then you've gained $1, like exactly. And in terms of equity, you've gained $1. If you gain $10, you gain $10. If you double your stack, you double your equity. So if you had $100 and it becomes 200, now you have 200 instead of 100. So you doubled your equity. Now in a tournament or a sit and go, unless your heads up or unless the structure is winner take all, then almost always, because of the pay structure, like first gets, it's pretty top heavy and stuff like that, first gets much more than second, and which gets much more than third and so on, then it's going to be really important to consider, yeah, basically ICM in the pay structure. So for instance, if we double up instead of doubling our equity, it's more like we gain maybe, for instance, 80% or something. So if we enter like a $15 180 man, ignoring rake, our equity at the start is $15. Now if we double up the first hand, our equity is not $30. It's probably more like, I mean, there's a way to like easily just calculate exactly, but to give you an idea, probably like 26 or something like that. And the reason for that is because, once again, if we gain all of the chips in play, we don't gain all the prizes. Like we can gain 1 million chips, and then one other guy can have one chip, but he's still going to get second place. Even if we've got 1 million chips more than him, he's still going to get second place. And that's why, for instance, if you have one chip, you can still get second place if everyone busts before you. And that's basically like the simple explanation of the I guess the main idea of ICM. And to give you an idea, like basically in short, the adjustments to the bubble and the final table are pretty much this. On the bubble, or close to the bubble, so maybe like 25 players or less, roughly that kind of number, until 19, you can jam a little bit wider because almost everyone's calling reasonably significantly tighter. The rigs will call tighter because of ICM, and the randoms will call tighter just because they want to cash. And similarly, if someone jams into you and you have a chance of being eliminated, you need to call a little bit tighter, because obviously if you get eliminated, then you bubble basically. Now on the final table, jamming ranges are pretty similar, because whilst we lose more equity when we like get called and lose, people also call tighter because it's the final table. There's ICM and the pay jumps are pretty big, especially the higher buy-ins, like maybe say for instance even like 8+, I guess, because and to give you an extreme example, at the 35s, if you jump from like say 7th place to 6th place, that's like $200 or something. So pretty big, pretty good payday just for folding. So that's why randoms fold so much. But yeah, so once again, like the jamming ranges are pretty similar, just because whilst you lose more when you do get called and lose, in equity you also get more folds from people for the reasons I said. Now in terms of a calling range, it's going to have to be a bit tighter as well. Again, basically because of ICM, the chips you gain aren't worth as much as the chips you lose, generally speaking. And again, like to give you like a general idea, the deeper you are, sorry, the more short stacks there are, and the shorter they are, the more important ICM is. And that's just because whenever two big stacks collide, or any two stacks collide in general, there's a pay structure, 180s, 9-man sit and goes, 6-man sit and goes, anything like that. Everyone other than the guys who collided gain some equity just because they went all in, and that's because they can get eliminated. So, for instance, if the limper here, Reanimus, went all in and I called. Now, for simplicity, let's say we had exactly the same stack size. That's to say, when he loses, he busts, and when I lose, I bust. Now, unless we tie, which is obviously like quite unlikely, then if he busts, everyone here now, instead of like, there's how many people? Like 8 people right now, right? So everyone's guaranteed 8th place, and they have equity of the remaining prize pool as well. So again, they're guaranteed whatever 8th place pays, as well as being possibly able to get 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, or 1st, because obviously if they become if they bust now, they'll get 8th. If they bust next, they'll get 7th, and so on. So when one of us busts, then everyone here, instead of being guaranteed 8th place, is now guaranteed 7th place, regardless of what their equity was before the hand. So to give you an extreme example, let's say, I don't know, even the button, like this is us 93. If he had one chip, his equity would basically be almost like, if you do the calculation, his equity would basically almost exactly be equal to like what 8th place is, and that's just because the chance of him actually getting past like better than 8th place is so small because he's only got one chip. However, if we instead decided to like go all in and one of us busted, he would suddenly get 7th place guaranteed, and his equity would basically go to 7th place, because once again he's only got one chip, so it's unlikely he'll get to 6th. But the point is, we just like the equity he just gained obviously came from somewhere, right? And if you figure it out, it's obviously coming from the people who went all in. So yeah, I mean, again, the shorter they are, the more equity they're gonna gain when we collide, right? Or any stacks collide and someone risks being eliminated. So obviously, the shorter they are, the more equity is being lost, and obviously, the more equity is being lost, that means that if you're someone who's potentially going to be going in and all in, then you have to think about the fact that we can consider this basically called something like ICM tax, right? When we go all in, we lose some equity just by going all in, because we can bust and all of the short stacks will gain a lot of equity. And, obviously, therefore, even if the pot odds say we need, for instance, 40%, ICM, depending on, the situation, it could make it even as high as 50% or 55, or, it depends exactly on the situation. But to give you a really extreme example, which I hope should make it really clear, is like, and I hope I haven't given this example already, but I don't think I have. But let's say, and yeah, I'll make it quick, but just in case I have. But let's say 1 million chips. One guy has 1 million chips, another guy has 1 million chips, and this is 3-handed, and one guy has 1 chip. Now, obviously, ICM has some limitations, and this is why I say to all of my students, don't take ICM too seriously. If you use Sit and Go Wizard, I usually almost always put it on the chip EV and then make the range a little bit tighter based on my own adjustments. Like, I can look at the ICM ranges as well, but I usually don't. I almost never go as tight as what ICM says. But again, just 3 people, 2 have 1 million, one guy has 1 chip. Basically, if the pay structure is like 500, $300, $200 exactly for first, second, and third. And obviously it's more top heavy than this in the 180. So let's make it even a better example, like 1,000, 500, 200. I guess it's not, again, it's not accurate, but it's probably a little bit better than the last numbers I gave. Now, if you look at this pay structure, the equity of third place, sorry, of the guy with one chip is basically going to be like 200.0000001 or something like that. Now, second and first, their equity is going to be something like 750. Now, each, that is, obviously. So, yeah, there's not much to say, but you can kind of like see from these examples why that should be kind of obvious. Now, once again, one of the limitations of ICM is the fact that it doesn't consider skill, it doesn't consider where the blinds are. So, for instance, the fact that the guy with one chip can obviously get blinded soon means that it's, it will affect it. Well, okay, this is not a good example, but let's say some guy under the gun has like 6 big blinds, right? And another guy on the button has 5.8 big blinds. If the guy under the gun has 6 big blinds, it'll say that, like, ICM will basically say that his equity is more because he's got more chips, right? But then in reality, the fact that he's about to be hit by the blinds means that his equity is probably even, if not even, maybe even a little bit less than the guy with 5.8 big blinds, just because the point 0.2 big blinds is not is made up for by the fact that he's not going to be hit by the blinds for quite a while, whereas the guy with 6 big blinds is about to be hit by the big blind and the small blind, so his equity will actually be less than ICM says. Anyway, for, in terms of actual calculations, he should have basically something like this in equity. And the other two should have something like this. So if one of the big, like, let's say the guy with one chip is on the button and he folds, and again we're going to ignore the blinds obviously because the antes, but so he's still got one chip, and if he folds, he'll still have one chip in the next hand. But let's say now it folds to the button, the small blind with 1 million. He shoves into the big blind for for his whole stack 1 million. The big blind, if he calls with ace king, even if the 1 million stack is shoving any 2 cards, he needs to fold ace king, and he needs to fold it really quickly, because when the guy with ace king wins, he gains 250 in equity basically, because obviously the other big stack will get eliminated. He'll get paid 200, and therefore the prize pool will be split between him and the small stack. He'll have 2 million chips. That guy will have 1 million chips, and obviously out of the $1,500 prize pool, this guy will basically have like 1499.99999 and so on, right? Like the chance of the one chip guy beating the 2 million chip is basically almost 0. So he gains 250, right? So he now has 1,000. Now if he loses, on the other hand, he loses 500, because he's got 750 in equity now, but when he busts, he gets 200, which is third place. So he loses 550. So basically, even though his equity is really good, it's not good enough to compensate for the fact that when he wins the 1 million chips, he gains far less than he loses when he loses. Yeah, when he loses the 1 million chips. So that's basically just the reason. And again, if I did explain it already, I'm really sorry. But it's definitely important enough, so that it's worth explaining again. And yeah, it's basically just the explanation of why it's so important to consider. Well, important to consider ICM anyway. Once again, I'm not really one of the guys who really loves it that much, and I never really applied it that much. But you do need to call a little bit tighter, especially once there are shorties in your big stack and you can face getting eliminated. Hopefully, some spots will come up, and I can talk about those spots basically. So yeah, anyway, here this is it's okay to call here. I don't like, obviously he's min raising under the gun, even though this guy is committed, so it's like his range, but I don't know, it can be kind of strong, like ish. I think with a strong hand he might raise a little bit more for protection or whatever, but at the same time he can easily do this with like a weak ace or something like that, because he obviously realizes this guy has almost any 2 cards, if not any 2 cards, and it's a cheap way for them to isolate. At the same time, we're getting good enough pot odds, and when there's someone who's already all in and committed, usually people are much more straightforward. Like, they don't really have, actually in this exact situation it's a little bit different, because the side pot is so small, but well, it's quite small, so he still has some dead money to, like, to bluff us off. But generally they're gonna play a bit more straightforward because one, there's less dead money and they have less incentive to bluff. I mean, some weaker players don't understand this and they make a mistake of bluffing anyway. But generally, people are gonna be playing tighter for that reason, and also because I guess the fact that their hand goes to showdown no matter what, some people don't really want to be caught bluffing or whatever. But like I said, it's fine to call there, I think. I mean, it's definitely fine to fold too, but with those pot odds, and I expect it to go to showdown very often, I think it's okay to call. Yeah, I mean, and usually it's pretty standard to just check every street. There's not really much point in betting the river or whatever. I don't think. Yeah, not much to say really. Yeah, so I mean, I didn't actually know that he had a weak ace, but that's an example of the kind of hand he can have just to isolate. So yeah, pretty easy fold. Easy fold. Easy fold. Okay, now it looks like we win like almost every pot after this. So get ready. Pretty easy jam. What do we do here, guys? Think about it. Yeah, it's just jam. This is a fold, I guess. Here. Yeah, not much to say. Like, it's kind of a sit and go wizard thing. I think jamming is pretty standard here versus most people. I think he folds very, very, very often. Like, obviously our hand doesn't do too well, but if he's a rig, there's a short stack here, ICM, two short-ish stacks here, ICM, and like he's also got a bigger stack than the button and this guy, so ICM once again, but mostly because of this guy and also kind of these short guys, and um even without ICM, it's not like he can call that light. I mean, that he will raise and call that light anyway, so it's fine. I mean, you can also fold there, but at the same time, I also wouldn't really mind jamming almost any two here, really. Although, it depends on who it is and any reads I have. But, yep. Yeah, guess what we do? It's pretty hard. No, it's not. It's a jam. Damn, we get called. If No, I was just gonna say, no, never mind. I was gonna say maybe ICM would like recommend him to fold or something. Like if you put into sit and go wizard, it might even say, might even put it into fold or whatever, which is pretty ridiculous. But no, I would definitely call with his hand in this spot every time. But I was just curious. Yeah, pretty easy fold. Once again, easy jam. These guys are gonna be calling pretty tight. Here I would normally jam, but my image is kind of weak. Sorry, kind of maniac. So I decided to fold. Yeah, fine. Again, fold. Yeah, I mean, unexploitable, very, very easy, very, very profitable shove. Yeah, okay, once he limps, it's a fold. If he folded, I would normally jam, although with my image, I might fold, just because I think that, I don't know, these guys might have some sort of suspicions that I'm jamming light. Yeah, this is a pretty easy jam every time. Easy jam, once again. Again, we get collared, right, guys? Like, you saw how bad I ran. um, yeah, pretty easy call for any two cards. Obviously, we need 22% equity. I mean, come on, unless he's jamming aces only, then yeah, easy jam every time. It's a yeah, I mean, I would even go as far as saying it's a pretty big mistake not to jam this. I mean, honestly, I think he has to, I don't know, call like 80% or something like that, something crazy. It's like 5 big blinds, there's antes, it's a final table, he's willing to fold, and, we run pretty good, but at the same time, we ran bad in terms of how often they wake up, I think. No, I'm just making excuses. Anyway, yeah, this is probably, I was gonna say close-ish, although it's probably okay because it's suited. I mean, the hand isn't so bad. The small blind is short, but the big blind is deep, so it kind of deep-ish. It balances out. Having said that, our normal defaults should be a little bit different because it's only three-handed, so the antes aren't as big as they normally would be. So definitely keep that in mind. I think folding here is definitely fine, and I don't really like raising here unless they're both extremely passive and straightforward here. Yeah, I mean, again, when they limp, I jam pretty wide. This is a little bit deeper, but the short stack is here, so I don't think he's trapping very often. Like, I think it's pretty suicidal ICM wise to limp ace king here, for example, and even like probably even like 8s and 9s, 10s and stuff like that. So I expect them to fold like almost every time. I don't know if I jam any two here just because we're a little bit deeper than normal, but with these stack sizes, I think it's probably fine to jam any two here, even though we're a little bit deeper than often. Okay, so he was trapping. Yeah, I mean, not much to say. Like I said to you guys, you have to run good to win. Haters gonna hate and so on, whatever. Here, yeah, any two for sure. He's not calling wide enough unless he's a rig, and I don't think he is. Yeah, and he's probably just gonna fold. every time. Yeah, I mean, sure, even like, oh no, he had two big blinds. Okay, so that's why. Like, I was gonna say he adjusted, but no, he really didn't. I mean, he folded like every hand, and then he realized he was committed, I guess. So yeah, and of course we lose. We run so bad. Yeah, it's a fold versus this guy. No, it's a fold versus like pretty much everyone, I think. I mean, it's versus some rigs who I know are jamming into. I might call just because we have, I guess, just enough equity. But yeah, otherwise I fall pretty happily versus this guy. Again, I know he knows I'm capable of jamming light, but I don't really think he will adjust that much. Yeah, not much to say. Like, even if he doesn't, like, he will adjust probably, but he won't adjust enough. Like, he might now start calling with King 10, which he would have folded other before, but now he's not gonna call like King 5 or something, probably, like with the stack size as bad. Like, yeah, I don't know, just because I don't think, yeah, not much to say. Like, I just don't think he will. Here, yeah, even versus him, I'm calling this pretty happily. So yeah, I mean, that's a $3 rebuy. Hand history. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Next few episodes, I'm going to be once again hoping to quickly, sorry, not quickly, but hopefully going to be able to sort out and do like a hand history review of a student from Deuces Crack that I mentioned a few episodes ago. And also, I'm going to be doing a live video, at least one, maybe two, of me playing, and you guys will hopefully get to see, how I play live, I guess. I will either be playing 4 tables tiled, or, and I'll have to, talk to a few people about this, but I think I might try from popular demand. I guess a few people have asked me. I will try to at least do like some minutes, like for instance 15 minutes or something, maybe not an entire episode, but definitely some footage of me playing 30 tables stacked. It'll be pretty hard to follow for most, or like a lot of you anyway, I think, just because, I mean, yeah, I guess it's just, unless you play that many yourself, it's really, really hard to follow, I think. Like, quite a few people have watched me play, and usually they're just like, oh, they just give up because it's too hard to follow. But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting, and probably will help some of you guys, especially those of you who are looking to play more tables eventually. So hopefully I will definitely get at least 15 minutes of that, if not more, maybe even an entire episode. But once again, I'll have to see. Let me know about any comments you guys have, any questions, and as always, thanks for watching. This is OMG Clado for Deuces Crack, the top 0.56%.